executive is just somebody who's like the wizard, right? Like you just like know so much. You're like,
the oracle.
so you're the oracle. And I realized that absolutely is like not true. So I've encountered people who have really high titles who still need a lot of work. And so I think for me, helping to remember that piece of advice of just like everyone is a person in the organization. Don't exalt someone because of their title.
We have a white male and we have a diverse candidate. The white male is better qualified for this position. Which one are we hiring?
Welcome to the POZcast, where we introduce you to incredible humans who share their journeys with the mission to inspire you to harness your own inner tenacity to drive your life and career forward. And now, your host, Adam Posner.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the POZcast. We're bringing the best and the brightest in the world of business, marketing, and personal growth to help you harness your inner tenacity and drive your career forward. Folks, my guest today on the POZcast is Tara Turk Haynes. Yes, we've been waiting for this one for a long time. She is a powerhouse at the intersection of talent, culture, and business strategy. As a founder of Equity Activations and a seasoned executive, she's made it her mission to help companies embed diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging, don't forget about the B, into the DNA of their daily operations. As a first-gen college grad turned corporate changemaker, Tara has built a career designing high-impact measurable strategies that boost retention, unlock innovation, and create workplaces where people could actually want to stay. We have a lot to get into. We're going to unpack what she's doing at Leaf Group, so let's get to it. Tara, welcome to the POZcast.
Hello. Thank you so much. Long time coming. Very happy to be here.
Likewise. And we were just talking beforehand about what a wonderful, not so small, but small as far as tight-knit community that we have in this world. We see each other at conferences, events. Everyone's kind of interacting, and it's created an ecosystem, in my opinion, of communication, right? Where we're able to get the messages out, diverse voices from not just what we look like on the outside, but what we have in our head, right? Different points of view, and really spreading the word to make this people community even stronger. So thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me so much. And that was really well said. I can't agree more.
Sometimes I could actually spit some interesting words out. So I want to hit the rewind button here because I love the origin story of where folks come from. And if you don't mind me asking, may I ask what your parents did for a living?
Oh, that's such a good question. My dad worked on the line at Ford Motor Company for 40 years before he passed away, before he could retire. And my mom has been like an accounts payable clerk for most of her life. She's retired-ish now, as much as a person who with that much energy can't be retired.
Right.
It's not even energy. It's that she has actually never not worked in her life. And
that's the thing.
That's a very sort of transition that we don't always talk about, right? Like I did talk about it with my dad before he passed away. I was like, what's your plan? Because you are, I tell this story sometimes. He was also like a loan shark. Like he used to loan money out.
I like this side. Yeah.
In Detroit, because
do what you got to do.
Do what you got to do, but you also like have to have a real understanding that Black people and banks have not had always the best, strongest relationship. And so sometimes if you need money, you do need to be in a community where you have a loan shark is necessary, right? But his whole plan was because he loved driving. He was just going to drive like one-way car rentals back to where their origin was before. And I was like, you know what? That is completely on brand for you. But I never got to talk about it with my mom. And I think that sort of moment where your body is not as energetic, as your mind it is. And so I think she just kind of went straight into it and was like, wait a minute. Okay, I'm older.
Now, I assume, listen, I mean, I've had not a conversation on the show before, but I am a student of history, and I understand the distrust in the in the Black and people of color community with banks historically, right? The systemic kind of racism and all that stuff too. Mm-hmm. So how is your dad's? Was he like your stereotypical loan shark, or was he more of like the nice guy local bank?
I mean, he could not be nice if you owed him some money,
right?
But right. But he definitely was that bridge between what you needed to get by to the next day, whether it's like rent or food or whatever you need. But like, I mean, I don't have a ton of stories, and I don't know if that's because I'm his daughter, where he just had to like be
Insulate
an
you.
enforcer. But, he definitely was, I think, a community staple, like many others, where, that shortcoming of systemic racism and economics, there needed to be a stopgap, right? Like we need to, in order for us to survive, we need a stopgap. And that was definitely him.
What do you think that core lesson was that you learned from watching your dad growing up?
Well, first of all, he used to make me count money. And I was like, I don't understand if you know how bad I am at math, but I think the goal was for him to get me to be better at counting and math and making sure that I understood the importance of numbers and budgeting. Honestly, because my brother and I laugh now, but he used to have those like pens that had 4 different colors,
Yeah, I had the clicky pens. The clicky pens.
clicky pens, and a lot of his records were kept on time cards from Ford. So like he had like who owed what, all of these different things, and he had a color coding system. Like honestly, I think
Machine.
it was a well-oiled machine.
Pun intended. Pun intended.
So yeah, it was really, he helped me learn a lot about the importance of a system and money and being able to count really quickly.
Yeah, I mean those are valuable life lessons, and I want to double back to what you said about your mom. I find it so interesting about how hard it is for folks that have been working their whole life consistently to just stop working in retirement. Both my parents were New York City Board of Ed teachers, and I remember when they were going through their retirement, it was a hard transition because they didn't know what to do. Their whole identity was tied to work, and now we're in this place of workplace and work and people management where we're trying to decouple your identity from work. But why do people have such a hard time doing that? Like, I'm a recruiter, but I'm not a recruiter all day long. I'm not a podcaster all day long. I have, other sides of me. Why is it so difficult for folks?
I think that the nature of jobs have changed significantly. I mean, if you think about what your parents do for a living, that's a very hands-on job. It's not like you're teaching kids and you're dedicating a lot of work and ethics to that. I think also we are entering a world where that side hustle, like my dad had, is a lot more prevalent for some of us. We want multiple streams of income because I think around the 80s when, the Reagan era where corporate no longer meant family, right? Because we're selling companies to overseas, and those kind of the ethics of, starting a business, especially if you were like an entrepreneur, change because we're now dealing with a global owner who may not have the same, values and mission and core values. I think people felt like a little protected. So like, how do we make sure that the money is still coming in? I have 2 different jobs, right? Let me do this. And so that whole idea of doing one job for your whole life, like though my dad was that, right, after the military, after Vietnam, he definitely only worked at Ford. It's almost impossible now at this point.
No.
And so, having boomer parents, like they're just like, wait a minute,
it's a different generation.
Where's our pension? Like there's no pension anymore. So therefore, you're a recruiter, podcaster, all of these different things, because 1, you can, right? But 2, it's almost out of like, I don't want to be pigeonholed anymore where I feel like I'll be let down by this industry. I can't be there.
It's so crazy too. And you say that too, like it's about ownership of your career, ownership of your identity as best as possible. So I want to go back to your story, which I find so interesting. First gen college graduate, navigating corporate, workplaces. What was that like? Not really having that role model at home who went through that corporate.
I'll go back a little bit. So my parents always valued education because my mom probably did a semester at Kent State right before right during the riots. And so my grandfather pulled her out of college. And I just think at that point, she was like, okay, well, I don't do I need it? My dad my dad went to Vietnam, so he didn't necessarily come back and be like, yes, college. So they knew that it was important because I think they're, especially when you have parents part of like the Great Migration, the idea is for you to be better than what we were. And unfortunately for them, they also thought like the more expensive the school was, the better. So I went to like the new school, Eugene Lang, which was a very sort of specialized, expensive New York school. And then parents afterwards, and they're like, yes, that's great. And I'm like, okay, but I'm in debt to my eyeballs. But they're like, you have an education, you are set up for success.
Did your dad try to help you with that debt?
We pay for a lot of, like, honestly,
I kid.
I'm such a proud person that I already knew what had been sacrificing for me. And so if I went to my dad for money, it was either one, to move in New York City, which we all know
Right.
is very expensive.
Ridiculously expensive.
But I never, they would get mad at me because they'd be like, "Do you have money for dinner?" I'd be like, "Sure." And they're like, "What did you eat?" And I'm like, "Ramen." Like, they would get mad at me because I would not ask for money because I already knew how hard money was for them anyway. And so,
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
how has that affected your relationship with money?
Oh, I am very. It's interesting. I'm still working through this as an
Yeah.
adult, but for me,
Tell me about it.
stability is really incredibly important. I am a stasher by nature just because I feel like, it's funny. I'm almost like I was telling someone the other day, the older I get, the more I start to look like my grandma. Like, her face is taking over. She's no longer with us, but I'm like, that's fine. But she was also known to be a stasher because she grew up during the Great Depression.
Mm-hmm.
So if you needed like a box of cornflakes and maybe a Coca-Cola, it was probably in her closet because she used to like hide, and I'm
Isn't that called a hoarder?
no, that's called like, just in case, you pull out,
Yeah.
maybe like, next to her, her
You got it.
frozen, you got like, a case of Coca-Cola because it's not, it's that just in case. And I am kind of like that with money. I like to stash it in different places, like digitally, like I don't ever want to
Diversify.
be without.
Yeah, totally get it. So when was it, like, did you decide to go all in this world of people, like talent, culture, performance? Like, how do we get to that point?
Well, what's interesting is I went to college. So undergrad was social and cultural. I got studies, and really just understanding people in society from a race, race, social standpoint, and gender, all of those different things. And then for grad school, I went for theater because I'm also a playwright, which is not lucrative, but
it's a passion, but it keeps your mind sharp, and it keeps you
exactly.
interested and interesting.
100%. And so I know, even though my parents were super proud I got a graduate degree, I was like, it's in theater. And they were just like, they don't care. And I was like, they don't understand actually that, even if you get a play on Broadway as a playwright, you still need like 7 different other jobs.
Right.
So I became an admin for the better part of my first part of my corporate career, because that's what I did to survive in order to also
do what
write.
you gotta do.
So I was an executive assistant for many years. I call that having an MBA 101 within the organization. Because
it's one of the best. You are the gatekeeper. You are listening to everything. You are basically a chief of staff.
I just learned so much working as an EA first I was second assistant to the head of Penguin Putnam, which was, like right out of the gate. I tried nonprofit for a little bit, and I was like, I feel like I'm paying to work here. So I'm just like,
the concept is
like that. That's not for me. It's for somebody else. And then so Penguin Putnam, and then I went on, that executive went on to AOL. So pretty high.
AOL, geez, going way back.
Yeah, I was EA for some high level executives. Sundance Channel, all of these different things. And it wasn't until I got to Ticketmaster, where I was the EA to the CEO, Sean Moriarty, at that time, as well as Beverly Carmichael, who was the chief people officer. She had come from like Southwest, such an amazing person and pedigree. And she was the one who basically was like, I feel like you would be really good in talent acquisition. Like, you're very, like, you encounter many people. You have such a good read on people. And she's like, I think that would be a skill set that you would be looking to develop. And she basically got me, put me in her people org as a coordinator. It's a recruiting.
We all find our way into it. We get pushed, pulled, tossed, kicked, tripped, whatever it is. We get pulled into it.
Whatever it is. But it was the first time somebody had actually made a suggestion about a career path for me, which I was very grateful for.
So pause on that for a moment. Like, someone made a suggestion, and that suggestion was based on them caring so much about you, them watching you, them seeing your strengths, and giving you proactive career advice, because that's what they do best. And look where it's led you today. They knew, they saw that in you. They saw that spark. I mean, I'm not going to go into my story, but same thing. Like, someone sees a spark where you're like, you know what? You're really good at this. You might want to consider that if you're ever thinking about a pivot.
Yeah.
That's powerful. That's powerful.
Beverly is a powerful person. She is a mentor to many, myself, Lars Schmidt, so many people. So like Beverly is the real deal and models the behavior I think that I now have for other leaders, is in that sort of, how do I hold capacity for recognizing talent in others and facilitating that development, right? So that I think, she's still a mentor to this day. I still talk to her regularly. Like, that's how impactful she's been in my career and just in personally.
Isn't that part of servant leadership, right? How you pay it forward?
It is. And I wonder, like, is that going away? I don't see it often, to be honest with you. And I feel like I see it less and less as we progress into like whatever we think, the modern workplace is. I don't see a lot of servant.
Yeah, you know what? Let's. I'm going to take your cue on that. Let's get into it. We're going off script here because
Yes,
that's what I do.
do it.
And anyone who's playing along at home, I do a lot of research. I do a lot of notes here, which is my guideline. But when I hear something the guest says that I want to go into, let's talk about that. My take is I think that there's a real deluge, whatever you want to call it, in leadership training. And I'm not
Yes.
just talking about formal leadership training. I think it's two factors. One of them, I think that the pandemic was a big problem. I think that we all went into our silos and we were rightfully so concerned with putting the oxygen mask on us first. A lot of us were concerned about taking care of ourselves, our family, physically, mentally, spiritually, economically, financially, and we had to prioritize. And I think that a lot fell off also when we weren't in person, that we didn't have that hands-on training. Now, that's not to say that you can't substitute remote leadership, but there's something to be said about, and maybe I'm the old boomer in the room now, but my experience, Tara, came from watching, when I was in advertising early, watching those senior account people command the room and how they like work with their team. And I think it's fallen off. I think we've lost this idea of what leadership really means. Now I'm off my soapbox.
No, I agree with you. I'm going to add another layer to that.
Please.
My husband and I talk about this a lot. And I think that also something to do with sort of the tech boom has kind of shifted as well, because the tenure of a leader now is so much smaller than it used to be. And so I think that, there was a time when we all joined, companies like, me starting off at Ticketmaster or Sundance Channel, all those places. Those leaders were invested because they were looking at like, hey, 4 years from now, we're making decisions for 4 years from now. And we want to make sure we've got our eye on the present and the future. Now leaders, I think, are staying maximum, like 2 years. They're making decisions about the business when they may not even be there anymore. And they don't care. They're like, I'm not going to be there. So all the best to you. This is like this idea that I'm not as invested because I'm not here for a long time.
Well, that's one part of it too. And as you're talking, I'm thinking there's so many new companies right now, new startups that are out there started by we'll call them youngsters, that don't have any leadership experience.
Yeah.
So you have these folks that are either tech bros or gals, and they're starting companies, but they know the product, they know the technology, but are they leaders? And I think that's really causing a problem, and why there is an opportunity for folks like us to come in and talk leadership and talk process, especially around people or culture. So when you come into an organization that's just a blank slate, like what's that starting point? What's that discovery phase look like?
I think it's also a matter of understanding that it should be part of your value proposition.
Right?
Like if you know the product, you also have to know that the people are the ones who are going to make sure that product happens. And so because a lot of times some leaders, I think, are like, why do I need to focus on the people part of this? I say this a lot. And I think there are some leaders who go, the people part, it's administrative. I don't want to care about that. I'm going to outsource that to, the head of HR or whatever. I don't want to deal with it. Just tell me what kind of decisions I need to be making. And you manage that. When it's such a lost, it's a lost sort of interest and value proposition for you to really get involved in how people make the company run, right? Like, how can you influence through really understanding the design of organizational design? And a lot of times I think, when I'm brought in, it wasn't a thought about like how to do that. And so we're rewinding, right? And so we're going back to the studs of helping people understand, like, yes, vulnerable leadership really matters, like modeling the behavior that you're looking for. Don't do as I say, do as I am. You know what I mean? Like, there's just sort of like if I tell you the thing, and maybe it's something about like even how the startup has happened, if you communicated to the engineers or whatever, like this is the vision that I have, you go execute, rather than sort of talking about like this is how I want to show up for this business and this company, then then you have a different layer of success. But I think when they bring us in, then it's just like, okay, this would have been great to start off with like your business pitch. It would have been great to say like, this is the kind of leader I am. This is how I want to show up. These are the areas I want to grow in. These are the areas I feel like I know really well. Just being very aware of who you are as a person makes you also aware as a leader. Like, it's not rocket science. This is very like
right.
simple.
But I also think that some folks are. Leadership is not always an innate DNA quality that you're
No.
born with, right? I think you could aspire to be a leader, you could train to be a leader. And then there's certain people that aren't built to be leaders and they're meant to be individual contributors within a company. And I think that's part of people management, where you
Mm-hmm.
understand even someone at senior level, you have to find ways to promote somebody that's not just always into a manager role. Right?
Right.
Like how do you listen to them and understand their strengths? Where like, listen, this person is great, but they're not a people leader. Let's not push them into something that's not right for them. And I think self-awareness from a leadership perspective is key, and it's missing right now a lot.
It is. And I think that the one thing I think that engineering team structure has taught us is that you can have a chief architect, right? That
Mm-hmm.
person doesn't necessarily have to manage people, but they can be really good at strategy. And so I think clearly defining what does it mean to professionally develop in this company, and clearly defining what areas that you would need. How do you make that decision where you're just like, I really applaud when I work with engineers and they're just like, I just actually have no desire to manage a team.
No, I just want to work.
I just want to work. I
I
like
just want to code.
problems. I really like, so, and I think they're the one team I feel like that we do ask that question of, whereas other ones, if it's legal, if it's accounting, like
Marketing, product.
it's always built in, like, okay, so now you have this team, but like, can we apply that same philosophy to other teams where we're just like, okay, we have an individual contributor who's really, really going to make a difference on our strategy. And they're not a people person. Like, they don't need to manage people. We just need to help them manage the project itself with a high title because they've learned a lot.
Yeah, we just got converted. So what was that critical moment when you said, I've spent my time in corporate America. Now I'm going to go out on my own and create something.
Well,
What was that decision point like?
that
Well,
made for me. I actually was at Leaf Group, which was a parent company to multiple lifestyle style brands. Prior to that, it was called Demand Media, but we had changed and flipped over and, added e-commerce and, Well and Good and all of those different brands. And we got a parent company, Graham Holdings, who
right.
used to own Washington Post. They're lovely people. They have a huge portfolio. They acquired Leaf Group and they were like, why do we have this parent company when we're a parent company? And so
We
therefore,
don't need two parents.
well, I was like, well, one, because we are centralized and they were not, but I don't think we understood that until we were kind of peeling back the business. But I was laid off, and I was laid off at a time where there was a lot of talent leaders and DEI leaders who were like, oh, okay,
No.
this market sucks. And I don't know if the market has actually completely recovered, but this is 2023. And the beauty though, is that I had people who were like, hey, I've got this project. Can you come help me? And so I pivoted into being a solopreneur, which I have never done in my life. Like, not since counting my dad's money, right? Had I
That
ever...
counts. That seems like more like an indentured servant to me. I don't know if you had a choice on that, Tara. I don't know if it was solopreneurship more than like, hey,
but like,
come count dad's money.
Exposed to it, right? Like, I had never been
it.
a business owner. And so at this big girl age, I was like, okay, let me just see if owning a business, because I needed to do it. Like, I didn't win the lottery, so I still need to work and have money coming in to support my family. And so I started Equity Activations. I really wanted to see a company that would be able to embed a lot of the diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging concepts that we were all talking about. Because my biggest thing is that none of us defined any of those words. And so a lot of us were walking around with wildly different definitions, wildly different approaches. And different approaches were fine. But if companies couldn't really say, I know, what my audit has to look like,
Mm-hmm.
from a business standpoint, but I can't tell you what my diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy needs to look like.
Hey everybody, Adam here from the POZcast. Today's podcast is brought to you by the team at Fountain. Fountain is your full-service frontline workforce management platform. I have to tell you, Fountain's offerings are some of the most robust I've seen for any product in the space. They offer full solutions for hiring, managing, and retention. They are truly a one-stop shop focused on the frontline workforce. They also create informative content using their data. For example, they analyze a bunch of data from their fast food chains and created a trend report you could download now on their website. They also have a new ebook out called Frontline Voices. There's a lot to dive into. Certainly check it out. And you can learn more at fountain.com, linked in the show notes. Thank you. All right, so we're gonna get into it here, but I want to kind of level set on a couple things. Do you feel it's more impactful for an organization to be top down from management saying this is what we need to do and why, or have you seen stronger results from grassroots movement from employees?
I'll be honest with you, you need both. Like, because if you say one or the other, it lets the other group off the hook, and that doesn't work. What I have seen is, if we're not clearly communicating it, which is why, one of the things I've just launched recently is like my non-newsletter called The Way We Work, is we're not having the collective conversations we need to have in order to move business forward. And so especially when we start talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, like, yes, the leadership needs to be bought in, but also I need those people on the ground level who are just like,
of course,
have
champions,
that trust as well, and the champions. So one without the other. I've been in both scenarios, and I just don't think it works until we all come to collectively together and decide who's responsible for which piece of this, right?
Yeah, just come back from Transform. I literally was talking about this or AI in every one of the conversations here, and I was just editing my last podcast with Amira Barger over at Edelman, and she's a tremendous champion in the space. This is what she does for a living also. And we're talking about, I think from my perch over here, I think there's a lot of miscommunication. Now let's remove the racists and the jerks from the conversation. Let's remove them for the sake of this. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding by good people that don't understand that DIB also covers all women, veterans, disabled, neurodivergent, LGBT, but they only assume and associate it with people of color. Why?
There are 40 plus identities when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion that I think the problem is, one, we've never had a collective conversation about race and gender in this country. And so there's a lot of curated education that happens. I say this all the time. We don't have uniform education. So what I learned in Detroit is going to be vastly different what somebody learned in like Omaha, Nebraska, right? Like it just is going to be exactly. And so, me telling you what I have learned about my culture, because it made sense geographically speaking, since Detroit is like literally almost like 95% Black, and I go out into the world and I realize other people haven't learned the same things. We're already at a deficit because we're not on the same page about our own education. And so then we go into the workplace, right? And so all of those misconceptions and all of that misinformation and all those gaps of education show up in how we collaborate. Then we are already missing very important parts of each other's story in order for us to be successful. And so I think that that's part of it. And so people then also have this sensitivity that their lived experience is in question, right?
Their truth, yeah.
Yeah. So your lived experience is in question because you're just like, well, I'm just like a white guy, like middle America, like, and you feel guilty about it. And I feel like there has been some diversity, equity, inclusion work that kind of capitalize on that. But the true diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging people, I feel like the real operators who really want to make a difference have had some element of, we are trying to solve problems for everyone who has had an unfair existence in the workplace, period. And those people do exist. So when you silo out and you say, this is just for XYZ, or this is just for XYZ, some people read that as like, then this is unfair, right?
But let me jump in there for a second. You said something unfair. Who decides? I'm just playing like counterpoint here. Yeah. Unfair is subjective to some extent. You
can measure fairness, actually. Look at your performance review management and see who's been able to be promoted.
Access to jobs, promotion, salary, equity.
There is data that supports what fairness actually is.
So the counterpoint, and I don't truly believe in this, but I've heard it and I've seen it. is the reverse discrimination side of it too. And I know from a recruiter standpoint, and I'm speaking, of direct experience, where I've been talking to a hiring manager and they say, we're looking to hire a diverse candidate. And I always dig in and I'm like, okay, here comes a can of worms, right? And I slowly peel back the can. And I always get to the point, I go, okay, we're at the end. We have a white male and we have a diverse candidate. The white male is better qualified for this position. Which one are we hiring?
Well, one thing I would say is there's no such thing as a diverse candidate, right? Diverse.
You know what I mean?
And I know what you mean, but but language is really important for us, right? And so when we start saying the word like diverse candidate, I think that's how we get into this problem, right?
It has to be
start
defined.
The definition of what we're talking about. Like diversity is, and I use this a lot in my work, is colonial America. We're all there, but we're not all having the same experience, right?
I'm smiling because I like that. Yeah.
We're all there. We are not having
here.
Experience at all.
Native Americans are still here. Yeah.
Exactly. So if we're talking about equity, then that means we would all be there and having the same experience, right? If we're talking about inclusion, we're all there and we are making sure that we are including these people so that they can have an equitable experience like everyone else. Belonging means I'm not resentful about you being there and making sure that you have an equitable experience. I think any company that's going to say quotas is problematic. Because you probably haven't done the work to make sure, like, what does that even look like? What does our company look like? Who's getting promoted? Where are our gaps? Who is not having the most equitable experience within this organization? What are those groups? And how can we make sure that they do have an equitable experience? There's been one specific group that's mostly having the most equitable experience in the workplace. And I'm sorry to say, but it's been white men. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like,
it is what it is. No one's doubting that.
Since work has been around, right? Like there has not been sort of this challenge, like, 1974 is when women finally were able to get a checking account.
Imagine that. That was 5 years before I was born. That blows my mind.
This is what I'm trying to tell you. Like 1974, you could finally get a checking account. I was watching something about the author of Little Women. Her original house is like somewhere in Massachusetts, I think it is. But, when the house went into disrepair after she died, Louisa May Alcott, right. The women of that community had to get their husbands to purchase the land so that they could continue to make this a living museum for Louisa May Alcott, who wrote Little Women. Like, how ridiculous is that? So we have hundreds of years that we're trying to navigate and course correct. And so it's gonna feel like a rush. If you have received privilege, it is going to sometimes feel like this is unfair. But imagine how those other people have felt historically, right?
It's fascinating to watch and be a journalist in this space and report on it from my life experience, from my experience as a recruiter, to be fair and to also share my truth. And that's why I love having these conversations. All right, so you have a magic wand, right? If you could just wave this wand and have every company implement one equity-driven policy, what would that be? Oh, the dog wants to get involved now.
Oh, I'm so sorry. She just loves the noise. Anyway,
so ask your dog the question. if your dog.
She's answering.
Yes.
If I had a magic wand and I was trying to implement one thing, I would say get to know your data, because you probably have the data. Because one of the things I say in my company is feelings aren't facts, right? Like we all have our feelings and it's fine. But like before we get to solving problems, we actually need to know what our problems are. And I bet you 9 times out of 10, you have enough data to be able to reverse engineer what that looks like for you. And then you can spend your energy, your resources on solving those problems rather than doing like an out of the box, bias training kit. You know what I mean? Like,
so who are these companies that need your magic show? Like, how do they find you? You find them? Where's that connection? Because listen, you're not meant to work with everybody. Not everyone's meant to work with you.
Not for everyone.
And sometimes you find somebody that, hey, I didn't really think we were meant to work together, but we need to work together. Right.
I've been lucky. It's been word of mouth so far. I'm really grateful. People talk about the work that I do. I love partnering with other people, like, like Anessa Fike and Danny Herrera and Rocky
Good people.
Howard and Torrin Ellis. Like, we just, I enjoy working with other people and solving some of these problems, because we all approach things in a different, because we're all different people. But, you know, a lot of since starting my business, I have gotten to know public transit. I did something for a transit company, which I never would have done if I was in house. Like,
Interesting.
I know, and that was good to understand. I've done some nonprofit work, which has been really interesting lately. I have a few entertainment companies, because this market has been pretty wild from an entertainment perspective. But, I did a wedding organization as well, like made up of wedding professionals, which I found super fascinating and really learned a lot about what they all do, because that really is an area of hospitality that needs all of this work, right? It's so fascinating. It really
we could sidebar on that afterwards. I got some thoughts on that industry.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this, right? All right. So let's keep it straight here. We're in a very politically charged climate here in the States, to say the least. We're gonna keep it at that. We're gonna keep it at that level. And I feel that there's companies that are taking advantage of following the executive lead with dropping DE&I policies, with saying that it's okay to let people go in favor of technology, and they're just seeing it as the lead. Then you have these companies, incredible ones like Delta, that are sticking to their policies, and other great companies too. How do we keep our head above water here in corporate America? How do we stay on the right path and do things the right way, and not use these political excuses as a ways to roll back the clock and get rid of people and policy?
I mean, that's the thing too, right? Like, some of
Tried to
these,
say that nicely.
I know. I think you did a great job. Listen, a lot of these companies were performative to begin with, right? Like, they did it because everybody else was doing it, which is a terrible business strategy, by the way.
That.
Like, why?
Welcome to LinkedIn, right?
There is nothing that you should be doing because everybody else is doing it. Like, the whole point of being an innovative business leader is supposed to, so you can be innovative and with the right sort of sound foundation, right? So I tell the companies I work with, listen, I don't need you to do a press release about all the equitable work that you're doing. It is, in fact, just do the work, and your people will become your ambassadors. You don't need to issue out a press release. You don't need to do any of these different things. It's the same with talent, right? If you've got a great talent acquisition process, you know who's going to talk about it? The people who went through it, right? Like, they're going to be like, I cannot believe that I had that great experience. Let me tell you about it. So that's one part. The other part is that there are companies out there who do not have the resources to fight this administration. And I think we need to be hyper aware of the fact that, like, some of them are just literally trying to remove targets from their back, right? They're really literally
diffusing.
Be like, I don't know. I was on another podcast with Orlando Haynes, and no relation. And I was like, we're still trying to figure out there's no relation. But
he was great. I interviewed him last week. He was great.
He's so amazing. But I told him that some companies are literally like doing that thing where kids, if they, you hear your whole name, you just stand still. And they're just like, if I don't move, then they don't see me, right? Some companies are literally doing that. Like, if we don't move, we don't do anything, then nobody will see us. We won't get a target on our back. We won't have these expectations. But at the end of the day, just do the work, right? You don't need to do it loudly. You don't need to announce your exit like some of these companies are doing. And that's why I think a Target is really having such a hard time, is because you did so much work on the front end of really advertising how well you were trying to make inclusion and equity possible. And then you announced your departure from it. And so people feel really betrayed by that. So if you can just do the work, and because listen, that's terrible employer branding. That is terrible company branding. Not, people really kind of listen to stock and consumers. And you also have to understand your consumers are your candidates, right? And they're not a separate pile of people. Like, they have long memories, and they remember what you've done and what you haven't done. So if you can just stick to doing the work and making sure that everybody in your company is, having access to fair resources, promotion, just really feeling like that company is going to be strong. It's a good business idea at the end of the day, right? Then you're proactive rather than reactive. And I think that's the best way to approach it. Just get somebody to help you do this work without, the flashlights and the spotlight.
All right, let's head towards the back half of this show here. leave us with some optimism. What is putting a smile on your face in this space these days? What are some of those shining moments where the light is breaking through the darkness?
I will say I got the opportunity through my good friend Kat Kibben a few weeks ago to be at the University of Wisconsin and talk to some students who are about to graduate. And I did a keynote for their career summit. And I want to say University of Wisconsin Stout, I have to be very clear. So I was in the middle of Wisconsin and first time. And I was so energized by how they are approaching what careers and work looks like
Mm,
for them. I feel like, the questions that I got were, how do I get feedback and not take it personally? How do I advocate for myself and others in the workplace? How do I deal with failure? And so I feel like, the advocacy question really made me happy. And I also really think that it made me help me understand we have these very generational stereotypes that people talk about all the time. They're these are people entering the workplace who care about how they show up and the work that they do. And they're really mindful about it. And that made me feel so happy. And I'm like, all is not lost. All right. Like they're going to figure this out and they're going to disrupt it. Like the very idea that they're entering the workplace already is a disruptor. And I'm very excited about it. And I hope they disrupt it in the most amazing way.
I
And I
dig
feel like
it.
they will.
What's next on your horizon? What are you working on that's exciting you?
Oh, goodness. I don't know because every day it changes, especially with these
Welcome to
executive orders. I
yeah.
don't, like it's just, I think what excites me is that I have released the Capricorn trait of trying to understand what's going to be happening in the next 6 months. I'm actually pretty open. I'm really
All
just trying to
right.
be like,
It's a good attitude.
let's just see how this goes and how can I really kind of dig into being agile. If I say as a leader that being agile is a valuable asset to have, how can I develop that more? Because especially in turbulent times, that's exactly what we need.
And
And so
stability.
I feel like it's something that I need to develop further and not sort of go into panic mode because it's very easy to get into panic mode, right?
Very, very easily, especially in this time and place. Be the voice of reason, be the calm that the
Mhm,
world needs out there.
mhm.
Tara, let's bring it home here. What is that single greatest piece of career advice that you ever received that you take action on daily and pay forward?
Holy mother,
We ended strong here.
you
I
threw me for a
I
good
I
one.
didn't this is what we do here, and I didn't even get to my closing question yet.
I know. Career advice. I want to say that this is gonna be weird. So
Go for it.
I
Hit me with the weird. I like the weird. We like the weird
before
on the pause.
so my last title was vice president. And so I literally am like one of the first people in my immediate family who's ever been an executive. And I didn't know anything about what an executive was. And so someone told me in my career, like, a leader is a person. And I had already decided, like, if an executive is just somebody who's like the wizard, right? Like
Mm,
you just like know so much. You're like
the aura.
you're the oracle. And I realized that absolutely is like not true. So I've encountered people who have really high titles who still need a lot of work. And so I think for me, helping to remember that piece of advice of just like everyone is a person in the organization, don't exalt someone because of their title,
Mm,
right? Like don't do that. And I think that's really been helpful for me.
yeah, I love it. And last but not least, you've been through it, you've seen it all, and you've reached levels of success, and you're aspiring for levels of success in your life for you and your family. But Tara, how do you define success?
Success for me, and these are the two words that I've been leaning into. I don't do like New Year's resolutions or anything like that.
No.
I kind of just think about words that I really want to embody for that year. And for me, it's been soft abundance. I don't want to grind. I don't want to be like hustle. I don't, the girl boss thing is over. I really just want to be able to show up with my expertise that I constantly develop and always work hard to have, but like in a way that doesn't make it feel like I'm clawing for something and I'm still able to have impact on people. The abundance for me is being able to reach other people, showing up with what I know, with what I'm still learning, and it doesn't feel like it's this just like grind. I don't want to feel like I'm grinding.
I love that answer. I'm smirking over here. And anyone who could hear me through the microphone or watch us on these clips here, I love it. Tara, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a fantastic conversation. Looking forward to continue to build our relationship through all of our friends and family network partners across the wonderful world of TA and people tech that we have here. Everyone check out equityactivations.com. We're going to link it up in the show notes and sign up for Tara's newsletter, The Way We Work. I will link that up with as well. Any place else? Where else can people find you, connect, learn more?
I'm obviously constantly on LinkedIn. It's a love-hate relationship, but I have been playing a lot more with TikTok, just because I do, I like to do videos that are just fun. I was on Twitter. I'll never call it X, but I was on Twitter for a long time for a reason. And that's because
he sold it back to himself, the son of a gun.
Right. It's so ridiculous. But as a talent professional, I don't ever want to be where I'm just reaching those people who have the ability to be in these privileged spaces. I feel like I want to be in a social media where I have access to people who know nothing about the workplace, who are just trying to figure out their jobs. And so I've been doing that for TikTok because I want people to be able to have information that I wish I could have had when I entered the workplace. And so my videos, I'm just playing around with them, but I really want to talk about what's helpful in work. So
we will link it up. What's your TikTok handle?
Oh, it's Tara Haynes everywhere, like Instagram.
Yeah, keep it consistent.
Yeah.
Keep it consistent. Well, Tara, thank you so much for joining me, and everyone out there. If this show meant something to you, leave a review. Rating it goes a long way. Sharing means caring. You know where to find out more at the POZcast.com. Follow us on social media. You know where the channels are. Hit me up with a DM on LinkedIn. Tell me what you liked about this episode. Hit Tara up. We'd love to hear from you guys. We love the feedback. Remember, be good to yourself, be better to others, and catch us next week for another great episode of the podcast. Take care, everybody.
Wisdom is forever, but for us, it's time to go. Thank you for joining us. Luckily, we'll be back with our next episode soon, jam-packed with more incredible humans. Thank you for listening, subscribing, and sharing. To join the conversation, search the POZcast on LinkedIn. And to catch up on past episodes and more info, please visit www.thepozcast.com.